What is the purpose of literature? And today we start by answering that and give you all a sort of a peek behind the curtain of how a performer prepares for the performance. What goes behind the scenes that you don't typically see as audience. I know we have a lot of performers here already, so hopefully I'll do a little bit of justice to that art form itself. So I'm going to start with a question, and that question is simple. What is Kavya? Kavya का क्या मतलब है? Kavya andre ಏನು? Poetry. Shloka, expression of somebody's thought. She said Kavya means poetry, and that's a good enough answer for most of us, right? Except Kavya is not just poetry. Kavya is any kind of literature. I mean, literature is not a sufficient word to express as a synonym what Kavya means, but that's the best we have in English at the moment. So we're going to say literature. There are two kinds of Kavya. One is the Drishya Kavya, and the other is the Shravya Kavya. Drishya is the one that you see, and Shravya is the one that you hear. Which one is this? Are you seeing me or are you hearing me? This one qualifies as Shravya because you could put a barrier in front of me and not see me and still get the same impact. Yeah? Whereas a Drishya Kavya would be like what you would call a Rupaka or a Nataka. A play that is performed on the stage, you can't just hear it and get the full experience. You've got to see it also. So seeing becomes quite important. So one classification already is Drishya versus Shravya. In the Drishya Kavya, we typically divide that into two. One is Rupaka, the other is Uparupaka. Rupaka is synonymous with a Nataka or a play or what we call theatre these days. Whatever is performed on a stage. And that's a Rupaka. Within that you have further subcategories, let's not belabor the point. Uparupaka is a smaller play which does not require a grand setting of a stage and people in various dresses and all of that. It could be what you would call Goshti or Nukkad Natak, for example. One person stands in the center and performs for 20 people in a street. That's good enough. That's a Uparupaka. On this side, which is the Shravya, we have Kavya, Gadya and Padya. We understand this? Gadya is prose, for lack of a better term. Please remember, I always use these words which are incomplete, but this is the best we have. So, a Gadya is prose and a Padya is poetry. What is poetry? Poetry is something that has a meter, that may or may not have a rhyme. It is written to a certain metrical setting, right? In the Gadya, we have short stories, novels, novellas, all of that. In the Padya, we have something called a Mahakavya. You know where I'm going with this now. That's where we are here today. So, a Kavya, which is a Shravya Kavya, which is a Padya, which is a Mahakavya. An example of that is Mahabharata. But why is it Shravya? I could read this book, right? If I read the Mahabharata, it becomes a Drishya Kavya. Why can't I not read it? Because the very concept of reading and writing did not exist. When these were being created, these kavyas were created in the mind and transferred orally to someone sitting in front who would memorize this, take this forward, tell someone else and someone else. And the oral tradition is what has brought the poetry of our times to where we are. So what we are experiencing here today, one person sitting and telling a story to 20 people sitting in front of him, is literally what our tradition has always been. We know what is Kavya. But why is Kavya? I started by telling I have a purpose here because I want to share my stories with you. So in a way, I am composing a Kavya now as we speak. Yeah? There is something called the schools of poetry which talk about why poetry is even essential. So now when I say poetry, I really mean Kavya. Uh, the schools of poetry talk about what is the point of poetry. Why do we compose poetry? I want to hear from some of you now. Why? What is the point of poetry? Why is it composed? And by poetry, remember, I mean everything: a play, a long story, a poem, all of that. Why? Spread a certain message, interesting, expression. So, like safeguard experiences. Okay, you're all right, of course. All of these are valid reasons to create poetry. But broadly, we identify 5 schools of poetry. The first one is what is called the Alankara school of Kavya. You understand what Alankara is? Alankara is decoration, embellishment, wearing an ornament to look more beautiful. This school of poetry ignores all of you. You don't matter, the audience. The reason I'm composing is because I want to create something beautiful for the sake of it. Beauty for its own sake is my point, and my point is to take something mundane and embellish it till it becomes beautiful. If you think about it, most poetry is poetry of love between a man and a woman. Most of it. Everything else is one category. 90% of all poetry is this category. But it is as mundane as it gets. Why is there so much love poetry? Because I want to embellish it in some way I have not experienced it before myself. That's the Alankara school. But that sounds very self-serving. To create something which does not consider the consumer of that poetry at all. And in time, the Alankara school of poetry, while it never went away, the importance of poetry for the sake of poetry, it reduced a bit, and people started finding meaning or purpose in composition. That is what we typically call the Dhvani school of poetry. What is Dhvani? Sounds, except not. Dhvani quite literally means meaning. What is the meaning of the word ka? Ka. What does it mean? Nothing. It's just a sound. What does la mean? Yes. La means nothing also. But when you bring them together, ka and la, two entirely meaningless varnas, become a shabda which has meaning in it. But the word kala itself independently is meaningless. If I meet you today and I say hi and then say kala, what does that mean? So I find even more meaningless varnas, create somewhat meaningful words, string them together and create a sentence, and that sentence now has more meaning than the words individually did. The words have more meaning than the letters individually did. And when you string sentences together and form paragraphs and then stories, then every time you are bringing meaningless letters together, if you do it with enough skill, you create more and more meaning, more and more purpose. And this entire school of thought revolved around how much meaning can I create in how little. So brevity was their point. How do I compose something that is so small and so artha garbhita, as the word is, which is pregnant with meaning, right? But it started becoming a bit show-offy. Like, I have the skill, so I'll show it off now. So, in time, that led to another new direction, and that what's called Vakrokti. What is Vakrokti? Vakra means bent, crooked. Ukti means words. Vakrokti is, that doesn't make any sense. a bent word. Is this supposed to be like abusive? What is it supposed to be? Vakrokti is me saying something but not necessarily meaning it. Satire is one way of doing it, right? Or when I do this, you don't look at my finger, you look at the moon. That's the joke, right? Ungli ko mat dekho, chand ko dekho. If you focus on the finger, you miss the beauty of the moon. So, poetry which means what it says is meaningless. If I'm saying it and that is what it means, what is the point? That's not Kavya anymore. That is Varta. That is just conversation. If I ask you khana khaya and you say yes khaya and it only means that, that's not poetry. But if there is a deeper meaning to it, if there was a code that is only agreed between the two of us, you may think I'm talking about food, but we are talking about something else. Then suddenly we are dealing in Vakrokti, and for the longest time, you will see every poem that you find, there is a second meaning to it. The first meaning is not important. Or at least it is only to hoodwink people who are not in on the joke, so to speak. Vakrokti continued. And then, while not opposed to it, another school of thought started, something called the Guna Dosha school. Guna is what? Good quality. Dosha is bad quality. So the purpose of poetry became how much guna can I enhance and how much dosha can I remove from a creation that I have. Increasing guna, decreasing dosha. This is now a chase towards perfection. People spent years perfecting just one composition because it's not perfect yet. There's a tiny bit of dosha here that I need to fix. There's a tiny bit of guna I might add. This alliteration can contain one extra letter starting, word starting from the same sound. And you push and push and push, and you take all the beauty out of that poetry because that's how far you have gone into it now. That school succeeded for a while, but dropped out. In time, emerged one school of thought about poetry, which was created by Bharata Muni. And Bharata created the theory of Rasa. The point of poetry is not the composer or the creation itself, but the consumer of that poetry. The reason I am here today is not because I derive pleasure from it, or at least it's not just that. The bigger purpose is you. And he said, Rasa, again a slightly untranslatable Sanskrit word, which can mean sentiment or emotion, but it is slightly higher than that. That Rasa Nishpati, the creation of Rasa in a Prekshaka, is the point. I am the performer, you are the Prekshaka. My purpose is to turn you from Prekshaka to a Rasika, somebody who experiences Rasa. And in time, before you leave, hopefully, to turn you from Rasika to a Sahridaya, somebody whose heart is full of that emotion as you leave. That is the point of the performance. Some people succeed, some people don't, but the point is that. And Bharata Muni identified that there are a few conditions that lead to Rasa, to the Rasa Nishpati, or the creation of the Rasa. And he put that in the form of a shloka and said, Vibhavanubhava Vyabhichari Sanyogad Rasa Nishpati. The 4 or 5 keywords here is Vibhava, Anubhava, Vyabhichari. Samyoga is bringing them all together. Rasa Nishpati is creation of Rasa. You all walk in here with some sthai bhava, which is you have come here with your heart full of happiness, anger, sadness, tension. whatever it is, you've come here with it. That I can't change. There are other emotions which are transient emotions that come and go. The Vyabhichari bhavas. These days, though, in more recent times, the word Vyabhichari itself is a little negative word. We use the word Sanchari these days. So Sanchari bhava and Sthai bhava are yours. What do? I give you a Vibhava. Vibhava is what? A cause. Something that starts all of this. And either I or the surroundings supply something called Anubhava. Vibhava is the cause. Anubhava is that which accelerates or intensifies or magnifies or catalyzes the thing that I have started with the Vibhava. So you combine that Vibhava and Anubhava and the Vyabhichari bhava that one comes and goes, that all interacts with the Sthai bhava that you have in you, and you means everyone here. With that is created the Rasa. So my job is not to supply the Sthai or the Vyabhichari bhava today. My job is to supply Vibhava Anubhava, Vibhava and Anubhava. Bharata Muni said there are how many rasas? 8. He said 8. We added a few later. We being some of his contemporaries, some of his students and so on. One Abhinava Gupta, he is credited with adding one. And in time we added a few. The 8 that we know are guaranteed the ones that are given by Bharata Muni. 1 is interchangeably used. Sometimes it is this, sometimes it is that. Okay? The first one is what is called the Rasa Raja. In fact, in a lot of old texts, Rasa means this Rasa. It's the Shringara Rasa. Shringara is what? It is love. But not just any love. It is specifically the erotic love that exists between a man and a woman. I keep saying man and the woman. I don't like it any more than you do. But these are created during that time. So we are talking Shringara Rasa, which is the king of all rasas, or the Rasa Raja. Okay? In addition, what do we have? We have Karuna Rasa, which is compassion. We have Bhayanaka Rasa, which is fear. We have Bibhatsa Rasa, which is disgust. We have Veera Rasa, which is valor or bravery or courage. We have Raudra Rasa, which is anger. We have Adbhuta Rasa, which is astonishment, wonder. We have Hasya Rasa, which is humor or laughter. I'm trying to keep the first syllable common. The Hasya is humor, Adbhuta is astonishment, and so on. This is the 8. The 9th one, interestingly, is depending on who we are talking to, it is Shanta Rasa, which is serenity or calm, or it could be Vatsalya, which is the love between a mother and her son or a father and his daughter. Shringara does not capture that essence. There is something called Sneha, which is two friends who like each other, right? It's neither Vatsalya nor Shringara. There are a few other things, but you get the general sense of where we are going with this. Let's take one story as an example and fully understand what is happening. This is a story taken from Ramayana, not Mahabharata. Rama's wife Sita is abducted by Ravana. They have gone on a hunt. Brothers, they come back, find that Sita is missing. This is the situation.